Good morning, my friends. How are you? I miss you so much. Let's start our science session with Miss Hasna Mustafa. Last session, we have a task. What happens when plants disappear in the world? What happens when plants disappear in the world? So, after our discussion together, we have many outcomes. Number one, identify the ecosystem. Identify the ecosystem, discover the food chains, select kind of plants to plant it, appreciate the greatness of Creator Allah. Ecosystem, it is an area. It's an area that contains living organisms and non-living things. Energy flows or moves through an ecosystem from plants to animals and between animals when they eat each other. Then, when living organisms die, their energy is returned to the soil. Hawks get energy from food. Hawks generally eat snakes, fish, birds, and rabbits and other small ground animals. Hawks don't eat plants, but they eat animals. Who eat plants? Depends on plants indirectly. So hawks depends indirectly on the plant. Hawks eat animals which eat the plant. There are few predators. There are few predators that can attack hawks, such as eagles or other hawks. What happens when the hawk dies? What happens when the hawk dies? Excellent. When a hawk dies, it decomposes and its energy is returned to the soil. There are many different ecosystems on the earth, such as oceans, rainforest, desert, or tundra. Animals don't choose the food they eat. They eat according to its taste, but they eat food according to what these animals' bodies need to survive, such as caracal eats mouse, rabbit eats grass, birds eat butterfly, and worse. Why animals eat plants or other animals? Worms, birds eat butterfly because animals need energy that comes from eating plants. Other animals, as they can't produce their own food. Very important to note, the energy we get from food comes from the sun. Again, the energy we get from food comes from the sun. Evaluation number 1. Complete the following sentence uses these words. Eat butterflies and worms. Caracals, grass, bird. Rabbit eats grass. Excellent. Number 3. Eat mouse, caracal. Excellent. And now it's time for food chains. Living organisms can be classified into 3 groups according to their ways of feeding into producers, consumers, decomposers. Producer, consumer, decomposers. Producers. Plants, they are organisms that can make their own food and don't consume or feed on other plants or animals. Producers, like a plant. The plant make their own food by photosynthesis process. Number 2. Consumers. They are organisms that eat other living organisms to get their energy because they can't make their own food like the plants. They can't make their own food like a plant. So these animals eat another small animals or another animals which eat plant. So consumers indirectly depends on the plant. Indirectly. There are three types of consumers: primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. Let's start with number one. Primary consumers. They are animals that eat plants. It depends on eat plants directly. Many insects, primary consumers. Second consumers. Secondary consumers, they are animals that eat the primary consumers. So secondary eat the primary consumers. Birds are secondary consumers because they eat insects that eat plants. Tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers, they are animals that eat secondary consumers. Tertiary consumers often large meat-eating animals like crocodiles. Number three, decomposers. Decomposers, they are organisms that carry out the process decomposition by breaking down or decaying dead organisms that recycle nutrients back into the ecosystem. Example: fungi, bacteria, worms, and millipedes. Decomposers, they are organisms that carry out the process of decomposition by breaking down or decaying dead organisms. They recycle nutrients back into the ecosystem. Example: fungi, bacteria, worms, and millipedes. Fungi, bacteria, worms, and millipedes. Okay. Food chain. Food chain is a model that shows one linear set of feeding relationships and movement of energy between living organisms. Again, food chain, it is a model that shows one linear set of feeding relationships and movement of energy between living organisms. Evaluations. Look at the following food chain, put true or false. Beetles is considered as a producer, living organism. Producer? No, it's false. Where is the producer here? Grass. Frog is eaten by snake. Frog is eaten by snake. Yeah, excellent. Wax is a predator, living organism. Yes. Frog is considered as a tertiary consumer. Frog is considered as a tertiary consumer. Yes, excellent. True. Food web. Food web, it's a model that shows many different feeding relationships between living organisms. It consists of many food chain. Food web, it's a model that shows many different feeding relationships between living organisms. It consists of many food chains. So, what's the small? Food chain or food web? Excellent. Food chain is a small part of food web. Part of food web. So this is food web and this is food chain. Evaluation number 2. The mouse and rabbit eat. Mouse and rabbit eat green plants. The ecosystem and food web can be affected by many factors. Let's start with climate change. Pollution, human activities, protection of the marine environment in Palau Island. Number 1. People in Palau avoid throwing waste materials in ocean. Number 2. Fishers must not overfishing the coral reefs to conserve the marine environment. Does pollution affect the food webs? Exactly. Pollution affects the food webs when food resources and habitats of living organisms in these food webs are polluted, which may lead to the death of these organisms. Smoke and ash spread all over the forest and cover the grasses. Animals may have difficulty breathing. How food webs can change. What happens if there is a gentle rain in the desert? What would happen? Excellent. The desert ecosystem will be improved because rainwater will feed the plants, which feed the organisms. What happens if there is a heavy rain in the desert? Heavy rain in desert. What will happen? Excellent. The desert may be harmed. Because the water of heavy rain will cause flood, which will destroy the ecosystem. What happens if there is a drought? All the grasses die. The food web in the ecosystem may be destroyed because the plants will die and also the organisms will die. What happens if there are many top predators in the food? The other organisms in the food web may be harmed because the top predators will eat all the organisms. Top predators. They are predators or consumers that exist at the top of food chain, such as tiger. Factors affecting ecosystem. Number 1. Increasing or decreasing the amount of water. Increasing or decreasing the temperature. Climate change. If the climate change is suitable, the population of a species increase. If it is unsuitable, the population of a species decrease, die or move to another place. Population. It is the number of organisms of one type of species living in an area. Seabirds. They build their nests on the top of mountain cliffs. They dive deep down in the sea to feed on small fish. The small fish feed on microorganisms in the sea. Microorganisms. They are organisms that are too small for people to see with only their eyes. They can make their own food. They are found in cold water to survive. What happened to microorganisms if the climate is a change and the water become warm? Microorganisms will move toward an area where the worst habitat loss. It is one of the main cases of extinction. Example of habitat loss. Again, it's one of the main cases of extinction, example of habitat loss. Coral reefs. They are some of the most diverse and valuable ecosystems on Earth. They provide food and shelter for marine organisms. They are important for tourism, where people travel to coral reefs for fishing or diving. This helps increasing the visitors and income of local hotels, restaurants, and business. How do coral reefs get harmed by feeding on plastic? Due to the effect of UV rays coming from sunlight, plastic products get broken down in small pieces called microplastic, smaller than a grain of rice. They, when coral reefs filter the seawater to get their feed, they ingest this microplastic and get harmed again. When coral reefs filter the seawater to get their food, they ingest this microplastics and get harmed. Coral bleaching. When the water temperature rises, coral reefs will get rid of the algae living in their tissues. Their color turns completely into white. They don't survive and die. Fish and other marine organisms that depend on coral reefs may die or move to another habitat. People that depend on coral reefs and fish for food will be negatively affected. How do sea turtles get harmed by feeding on plastic? How? Sea turtle can't differentiate between a jellyfish and a piece of plastic in the water. Therefore, sea turtle eat a lot of plastic, thinking that it is jellyfish. So sea turtle get harmed. What happens if the coral reefs disappear? It's a big problem. Organisms that depend on coral for food and shelter will die. Butterfly fish will have nothing to eat, so they will die. The shark will find a small amount of food to eat, so it's also may die. The algae that live in the coral tissues will lose their habitats. Habitat restoration. It is the process of returning a habitat and environment back to its natural state before harm was done. Nursery. It's an area in the sea where scientists take care of small pieces of coral until they grow up and can be moved back to the reefs where they were dying. This evaluation, I'm waiting for your answer on a small record. This evaluation, complete the following paragraph using these words. I'm waiting for your record. Task number 4, describe your pen. Next session, I'm waiting for your video and hold your pen and describe it. Thanks. It's time to say goodbye.